What's up, guys? Welcome back to another great episode of Beerfield Fantasy Shots. I'm your bartender tonight, Dan Thury at Thury BFF on the Twitters. Today, I bring you your weekly waiver wire ads. Guys, you should be targeting on the waiver wire, whether it be just for a weekly win for the upcoming week or a deep stash, or guys who just aren't owned above 50% in ESPN leagues yet. That should be. I will provide you guys with news later on tonight. When I'm done with this recording and get it uploaded, I'm going to continue to work on rankings, let the news kind of build up, see what happens for the day. Thankfully, it's been relatively quiet. Um, Doug Martin comes off of free agency. This is his last week, week 4. Yeah, he comes back next week. Snead is back this week, so for some reason, if he's there, I know both of these players, both Snead and Martin, are 90 plus. So you probably won't get them, but for some reason, if they're there, go out and get them. I will jump off with quarterbacks. I have guys you can throw out there if you just don't like the matchups this week that you have. Maybe you got Matthew Stafford, when I'm playing against the Vikings. Derek Carr on the road at Denver, guys. Even even Kirk Cousins after his nice game last night or on Sunday night. Do you really want to throw him out there against Kansas City, who's looked pretty good, and they're also on the road at Kansas City. So I got 3 names out there. All 3 names are not sexy. The 2 of these quarterbacks had really bad weeks last week, but they got good matchups. You got Jay Cutler at 4.5% owned, playing against New Orleans at home. This is New Orleans. I mean, if you're not Cam Newton, you're going to have a decent week. It seems like him and Parker are starting to figure their shit out. So Jay Cutler is a great play this week. The only quarterback out of these 3 I'm going to be mentioning that had a good week, this was Carson Palmer last night, sold at 17.8%. I forgot to write down who he's playing, so let me pull that up real quick. He finally found his way last week against Dallas. Or not last week, last night against Dallas, excuse me. And it's good to see. Just like Larry Fitz, who also had a nice comeback game, this is a relatively decent game for him. And Arizona is playing at home against San Francisco, who just made Jared Goff look like the second coming of Tom Brady. This is a great play. I know he's been up and down with it, and I know that I have kind of shied away from it, but when you're streaming quarterbacks, you have to, just like in actual quarterbacks when they throw picks, you have to forget about last week and then end season past season performances. Wow, words are hard. And Palmer falls in line with that. And then the last one is Trevor Siemian, 36.5%, so you may not be able to get him. Denver is playing at home against Oakland, who just made Kirk Cousins look amazing. Oakland really does have a great defense outside of their pass rush, which is just Khalil Mack. And Siemian has been really good at home. And this offense wants to have a nice bounce back game when they kind of got stifled against Denver. I got 3 deeper plays you can play this week. This is Jared Goff against. Wow, I'm sorry, guys. I just lost this. Jared Goff on the road against Dallas. Not the biggest fan of the tempo, but he's playing against a bad defense, and he's already shown to us 2 out of 3 times this year that if he's playing against a bad defense, he should do fairly well. Blake Bortles on the road against New York. Just like with Goff, I don't really know about game script's going to be in their favor. It's going to happen in different ways, but if for some reason the Jets play like they played last week, Bortles may have some garbage time, or this may actually be a decent scoring game. That's really fucking weird to say when it's Jaguars and Jets. And then lastly, Deshaun Watson. Houston's playing at home against Tennessee. Tennessee's been beaten up through the air. Derek Carr did it to him in week 1. They held Bortles in check in week 2 when that game got out of hand. And then last week they got owned through the air against Seattle when Wilson finally had his bounce back game. Look, Watson's becoming just a safe find. He's becoming what Tyrod's been. What you saw with with the original Neil, her himself, and Tim Tebow, where these guys have safe floor. They're not the best throwers yet, and Houston's still figuring their shit out, but Watson's developing that safe floor, which is what you want for a streamer. And these are just deep streamers, guys. You don't have to throw out there. Just some deep options. I got a lot of running backs to talk about, so I'm gonna make these quick. I do my best to. These running backs are still not above 50% owned, or they're just must-haves. Chris Carson is at 42.6%. Look, he needs to be owned. He's the number one there in Seattle. Tariq Cohen's at 41%. Look, he needs to be owned. One of the safer floors for all flex plays. Buck Allen at 38.7%. He as well needs to be owned above 50%, and he is a must-have if he's out there. He is their RB1. Terrence West is banged up. I wouldn't be afraid of Alex Collins. He may look like the better back against Jacksonville. That was in London. Really weird game. Don't buy into that just yet. And then Wendell Smallwood at 2.9%. He's going to be your must out of the week. He's going to be their more likely the one that's going to be out there. Even I know at 2.9% he should be there. You should be spending your top waiver claim on him, and I wouldn't be surprised if people started spending 20 to 25%. But don't go too crazy because Blunt's still there. But Small will look like the better back. Small was going to get the catching role, or the pass catching role, while Blunt will still hone his third and shorts and his goal lines, but Small was already showing us that he can do all those things. He's not great. He's been battling injuries himself, but he's now the safest on the back end, or he's the safest back to own in Philadelphia right now. These are kind of your weekly winner guys that could help you win this week, or guys that you should just be added anyways. Shane Vereen, 26.1%. Giants are playing the Bucks. Delvin Cook just beat the Bucks out of the hell through the air with 5 receptions for 70-ish yards. And the Giants don't have a running game at all. It's really, really ugly right now, and they need to find something to jumpstart this because they don't want to be too one-dimensional. Vereen's going to give you quiet weeks, but he's also going to give you monster weeks because of targets. So he should be owned if you need running backs. He's not a bad one to have and throw out there, especially in PPR leagues. Another one is Jamal Charles. Denver, like I said, is playing against Oakland this week at home. Oakland just got fucking ass raped by Chris Thompson. And Charles is starting to figure his shit out. He had the better week between him and C.J. Anderson last week against a really good Buffalo defense. And if you can get him prior to him maybe blowing up, and he should just be owned in general just because if C.J. Anderson goes down, Jamal Charles is the guy after that. You're starting to see Charles earn more and more work. This game could even go out of hand. I don't expect it to, but Derek Carr is good enough to maybe overtake this game, unlike what we saw last week where the whole offense just looked off. I expect them to come out trying to correct things. This is a very tough and almost won't say a must win because it's too soon. This is a divisional game against a very tough opponent on the road that, as a Raider, you would want to win or should want to win. Then deep stashes, guys that if you have the roster spot, own them. If you have their starter, own them. I'm going to throw out Washington's back and Samaje Perine and Mac Brown. Samaje Perine's on 13.2% of leagues. Look, he looked bad. I'm sorry, he didn't look great. I've been down on him. I know me and Nick have been down on him since we watched his tape. Hopper loves him. But he's still the starter, and if Rob Kelly is not playing, and if Perine can get back and healthy, he's still the starter there, in my opinion, even though he did fumble. Look, that fumble wasn't his fault. I don't expect Jay Gruden to just go right into Mac Brown. But when Mac Brown came in for Perine after he got hurt, Brown looked like the better back. He looked quicker, looked more explosive. When he saw the hole, he took it. Unlike Perine, who was just a little too patient. I think that's more of the rookie in him. So, in my opinion, Mac Brown's the guy to own, but I still believe Perine still gets to start if Rob Kelly isn't there. But if Rob Kelly is going to play, Mac Brown may take that role from Perine. So both the Washington backs are worth owning in deep leagues or deep benches. Next is Andre Ellington for the Cardinals at 0.9% ownage rate. Look, he doesn't need to be owned. None of the Cardinals back needs to be owned. Chris Johnson's still the starter, but Andre Ellington in PPR leagues has added that spark that this team has needed, and has been the best fantasy productive back, and Ellington will continue to be the one that gets involved the most, at least in terms of the passing game. So he should be decently ownable in most, if not all, PPR leagues. And if you need a running back, just like with Vereen, he should be one of the guys that gets owned. Next is Corey Clement. 0.1%. As a show, we were low on him after watching his tape with him coming out of Wisconsin this year. Didn't look great. I was up and down on him, but he just looked like he looked like the best back in preseason. After Sproles got hurt in their game against the Giants this past week, he went out there and started to get his carries. He was spelling both Blunt and Smallwood, and then Clement got the carries at the end of the game when the game still mattered. Look, this was an important win for them. And when the Giants got up, I believe they got up, or at least at the end of the game when it was still really, really close, he got Philadelphia's last touchdown. He had a nice, I believe it was a 15-yard run. And I've said it before when I watched his tape. When he gets the confidence, he's a very good-looking bat. It's just when if you get to him early, he starts to kind of struggle. And to me, that is something that can be fixed in the NFL. We've seen, players like that, or just overcome some of their struggles from college. And I expect that maybe Clement can get that fixed, and he looks to be the guy that he could, just like Chris Carson did in Seattle, could just overtake this job. It won't be the same way as Carson did, but I think Clement is ownable in all deep leagues, especially in Dynasty if he's still available. So please go out and get him if you don't. Matt Prida out of San Francisco, again, 0.9%. When Hyde got hurt in the Thursday game last week, Prida came in. He looked okay. He's going to get the passing work for sure, which is why he's now deemed ownable in deep leagues, especially if you're a Hyde owner that has an available roster spot. If Hyde goes down, Britta's the guy that jumps in. When Hyde went down, Britta got a passing target almost right away, and he is the immediate handcuff to Hyde. And lastly is Deonta Foreman at 5.5%. This should be higher. Him and Miller are starting to come even closer and closer in their touches and carries, and Foreman has just looked like the better back. It's only a matter of time. It may not be this season, or maybe a little too late into the season, but Foreman should definitely be owned in most leagues. This should probably even be a guy that should be owned in over 50% of leagues. And if you're a Lamar Miller owner, you should definitely pick him up and hold on to him as that, just in case insurance. And even if you don't, even if you just have the roster spot, you should be picked up. Next is receivers. Mohamed Sanu at 40.1%. He needs to be owned. He's finally coming alive in this offense as the number 2. And then his touchdown finally came last week against Detroit. And he is the true number 2 to Julio Jones. It's not Taylor Gabriel like we thought it was. Next is Sterling Shepard at 34.3%. 2 out of the last 3 weeks, he's been either the guy or the number 2 guy. And he showed last week that he is the number 2 guy. I think he is more ownable than Brandon Marshall, because Shepard's just going to get involved. He's just more electric. He's out of the slot, where Marshall will probably command more red zone work, which is great. So I think Shepard's going to command more work outside the 20s. And in PPR, you want targets are almost as important as touchdowns, even as red zone targets for sure, just because of all the opportunities for catches, which is great for PPR leagues, obviously. Sterling Shepard looks to be the guy to own there right next to Odell, and with a healthy Odell, it just takes off even more coverage. Even with Marshall there now, it's going to help Shepard even more. As what we saw last year, they still needed another guy outside. Next is Jermaine Kearse at 33.4%. Look, I was a little around last week. The Jets dominated the Dolphins, and there was no garbage time for the Jets. And when the Jets got up early, they didn't need to lean on the passing game as much. I still expect the Jets to be down a lot in a lot of games. They get the Jaguars this week, so this may not be the best week for it. This may be low scoring. We may finally come down from the 12 games that went over last week, where there's just a shit ton of touchdowns everywhere. Jermaine Kearse is the guy that owned. He's still the number 1 there. It's not Robbie Anderson. Kearse, I believe, had the most targets out of all receivers last week for the Jets. He just didn't get the touchdown because they didn't need him in garbage time either. Next is Josh Doctson at 33.3%. Look, Doctson, up and down career to say the least. He's been battling injuries. but he finally got it going last week. He only had 2 targets, but he had the one nice big play, which is what this Redskins offense needs right now. Terrell Pryor isn't getting it done. There's still something off between them. He's dropping passes. I don't know if it's the route running. I don't know if it's just his cousins not trusting him. But Pryor, in a favorable matchup, only had 4 targets on Sunday night and only caught 2 of them. Crowder is still the slot guy, but Doxson is the deep threat. Doxson's taking that Jackson role, and if there's a guy out there that could leapfrog Pryor, it's gonna be Doxson. That's why people liked him. He's healthy. He finally came alive. I think if you can get him this week, even a day after waivers, where it's all free, you're not losing your waiver position. He's a guy that you should be looking at picking up if you can stash a guy. I think he's definitely should be ownable in more than 50% of leagues because if this Washington team starts to come alive like we saw against Oakland, I think he's going to be a big part of that, especially downfield. Lastly, for receivers, Devin Funches at 11.2%. If Benjamin's going to miss time, it's going to go to Funches. And Cam has to throw to somebody without Olsen, without Benjamin. Next in line is Funches. Russell Shepard is another guy that could be owned here. I don't like this offense anymore without them. You can just see a lot of shitty checkdowns to CMC and even Jay Stu and maybe even Curtis Samuel. There's one receiver to own here in Carolina, though, it is a Devin Funches. New wide receiver 1 and Benjamin is to miss time. We'll move on to tight ends. Vernon Davis at 5.3%. Look, if Jordan Reed is not going to play, Vernon Davis is a must-add because he's probably going to be a tight end 1 for that week. And we saw it again on Sunday night against the Raiders when he had, I think, 5 receptions on 5 targets for 53 yards in the score. Next is Evan Ingram for the Giants at 18.5%. He's starting to get targeted a lot. This Giants team has finally realized, again, after changing OCs, or not changing OCs, but changing play calling to somebody that's not their coach, and McAdoo, you're starting to see this offense starting to click, and that is because of Odell too. But Ingram is getting its own, and in a really weird start to the season for tight ends. He's not a bad guy to throw out there on any given week. The Bucs did hold Kyle Rudolph in check last week, but Ingram is getting the targets, which is what you want to see. Next is Julius Thomas at 5.3%. I guess the Saints have been bad all around, and I expect this Miami team to bounce back against a really bad defense. Benjamin Watson at 2.8%. The Ravens look to have figured out who their starting target is, at least when it comes to pass catching. If Flacco's going to get his shit together, he's going to start with tight ends. He's going to start with a healthy Watson and a healthy Macklin. Watson should be owned. Like I said, with tight ends are just being fucking weird right now. Watson is a guy that you can throw out there and stream and feel comfortable most weeks. And lastly is Charles Clay at 9.5%. I called it last week. If you needed a streaming tight end, a guy who's got chemistry with his quarterback and really nothing else there, he got you a touchdown and he got you some points. Not the best and the most reliable streamer, but like I said, with wacky tight end play, Clay isn't bad. He's a little more consistent. And that's really what you want right now in your tight ends is you don't want a dud. You just want something good to happen for you. And then lastly, I'm going to give you 4 defenses that could be decent plays. Cincinnati against the Browns. Both the Ravens and Pittsburgh's defense, I know I said it last week. It was fucking London. I don't know what the fuck was going on. Baltimore is going to right the ship at home against Pittsburgh. Big Ben's been off all year. This whole Pittsburgh offense has been off. Yes, if there's a game for them to get going, it is against, the Ravens. But traditionally, these games have just been ugly, low scoring, a lot of great football, but not great for fantasy. And I expect this both to come alive. I expect both teams to elevate their play, especially on defense. And with this game being in Baltimore, I don't like Big Ben at all this week, and I think there's turnovers and sacks to be had. Then lastly, New England against Carolina. But Carolina is a shit show on offense. They still haven't figured shit out yet. It's a running team, and they keep losing their top receivers, or at least their top receiving targets in Olsen. If Benjamin doesn't play, this is almost a great start for the week. I don't like New England's defense that much, but if there's a game, there's always one or two games they have where they just completely dominated a team and they beat them by like 40 points and give up nothing. And there's a bunch of sacks, picks, turnovers. This isn't a great matchup. But this is one of those ones where you're looking at your defense, you don't have a lot there, and then you look at New England, you're like, but it's against Carolina, so maybe. I think this is a good defensive play this week, and I like them as a top 10 finish. That's all I got for my waiver wire ads. I know there's probably some more out there. There's been a lot. There's always a lot of wide receivers that you can pick up. Look in your league, see if there's a bunch of guys there. If you have questions that I didn't, if there's names on here that I didn't mention that you want to maybe add, and you want to ask us about it, just tweet at the show at BeardfieldFF. Most likely Nick will answer, but every now and then you'll get me or Chris. If you want to take one of us in these questions, I'm at 30BFF, and then Chris Hopper is at HopBFF. Nick's own Twitter handle is at Nick Sparks with a Z, not an S. That's all I really got for you guys. I'll be back on a little bit later on tonight when I get the news taken care of. Otherwise, I'll see you soon, and happy hunting with these waivers. See you guys.